Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for June 18th, 2018. We'll begin with a special order calendar decision items. Item number 1, 78945 BC, 560220 Broadway, Queens.
Okay. They revised their lighting plan to reduce the foot candles to 0 along the property line, so I think we're finally okay.
I just had one question.
Okay.
I think at the last hearing we had asked them not only to revise the plan but also physically implement it. And I don't know if that has taken place.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
I asked the applicant the question, and he said as far as he knew, they were putting the low wattage bulbs in.
Okay.
But I just said to confirm that, so when you come to,
Yeah, I hope it can be done before tomorrow's hearing, and if they can just provide some documents, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Item number 2, 2016-4255 BZ, 4801 Ocean Avenue, Brooklyn. This is adjourned.
Yeah, they're still waiting for their ZRD1. And we actually did get, with respect to another application here, a really good version of an approval on a ZRD1 where DOB went through carefully and came out with comments. For a single family home. Yeah, it's exactly the same. Yeah, okay.
What's that?
I'll give it to you after. I'll mention it in when we get to that one. Thank you.
Continued hearing items, item number 3, 30879 BZ, 43 Clark Street, Brooklyn. We good with this?
Sorry? So I'd like the fire department to comment, and I know the fire department is not here today, unfortunately. Fire department to comment on the applicant's recent submission about the correct occupancy loads in the public assembly areas. The architect or the applicant had written that the assembly that the fire department is insisting on changing on the public assembly permit, it doesn't represent the actual occupancy in the space, and I'd like fire department to just comment on that. But they did say that they were okay with us fire department said they were okay with us moving forward on the application, so that's just something that they should be aware of, okay? The applicant confirmed that the signage is only on the awning, and the drawings and resolution, the drawings that we have and the resolution that we create needs to clarify the size of the PCE because it's been a mystery in the history of the application. So if we just have a number, my notes from the applicant's materials say that the total PCE area is 75,837 square feet. So the applicant should just verify that that's the right number, and that's what we'll use on the resolution.
So that's the number that was in the prior BSA resolution?
No, there was nothing in the BSA resolution. That was the point. That's a comment that Commissioner Otley Brown made.
No, my comment had to do with the fact that they were missing several plan pages on the previously approved plan.
Right.
So their answer is that it was accounted for in the resolution, even though the plans are missing.
Okay, all right.
The
Right,
BSA
so they were
resolution, I just didn't provide the total amount, but when you total it, that's what it
down. Yeah.
That's what it comes
Right,
down
that
to.
was the confusion. We didn't know if it included those upper floors. Right, okay. So.
Item number 4, 18295 BZ, 18395 BZ, 2465 and 2473 Broadway. You're going to withdraw?
Okay, nothing was submitted to this. This was restored to the calendar in January and adjourned. And the case has been in hearing for almost 3 years, and I don't know what's going on. They're supposed to be filing for a variance,
Right.
But I'm not sure why we keep this.
They should withdraw it, no?
They should.
What's it, Carlo?
Yeah, I've had a discussion with them about they're going to be filing the variance. I just
Right.
don't know formally if they're going to withdraw this now and then just file, which I think procedurally would be fine.
Right.
We'll alert them again just to see if this is something they want to do tomorrow.
Okay.
Or by today.
Yeah, okay, because it's been sitting here and, if you're not going to pursue
I thought
it.
he was going to withdraw, all right.
Yeah, and, right. Because I don't know whether there's also an issue about the extension, so if I remember correctly, so it's an amendment, it was originally filed as an amendment to expand, which they can't do, right? Under the special permit. But the special permit expired already. So that's the thing, is like, why aren't they continuing with this application that the special permit only applies to that section that's legitimately able to apply to, and we clarify that in the resolution that special permit applies to this section, and then the variance is for a whole different.
So we would keep the special permit for the portion that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
need
That's
to.
the lesser variance.
It's a less, well, I don't know that they would be able to make an argument for an enormous piece, physical cultural establishment when you could get it as sort of by this easy special permit, right? So I think they should be getting the special permit through the special permit process, the section that is eligible, and then the balance they apply for the variance.
So then I'm not.
Yeah. No, but not to withdraw, but to continue to prosecute, yeah.
I was thinking of it, folding it in into one application, but I understand.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Let me know you're ready. Item number 5, 17505BC, 1824 LaCour Street, Brooklyn.
Of the name. Okay, as requested, the architect did a 2014 code review, and the required modifications to the project don't look significant. The owner says he couldn't locate indications of compliance with the restrictive deck, the environmental restrictive deck, but knows the project must comply. They haven't started any excavation yet, so it wouldn't, yeah. So it's like, we could have a condition that the project has to comply with 2014 building code, because that's not something we varied, right?
And do we have to also put a condition that they have to abide by all the restricted deck requirement, or that's kind of given?
It's never given, we can say that too.
Because
Nothing's
part of
ever
the restricted declaration requires that they do get the DEP approval prior to getting the permit from DOT.
Right.
So that should be very clearly spelled out.
Okay. They did, restricted deck. Okay, so we'll, in the resolution, refer to the the recording number for the restrictive deck.
Ready?
Okay.
New cases, item number 6, 24055BZ10, 20722 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
Okay. So, on November 21, they requested an adjournment at the, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong thing. I'm sorry, I'm just reading the wrong place. So on November 21, 2017, the board voted to dismiss this application for failure to prosecute. At the time, the issue was that after 5 hearings and 3 adjournments and an ultimate agreement by the property owner to restrict access to the site by entering it either directly from Northern Boulevard or from the adjoining automotive sales businesses that is under common ownership or operation with the subject site, and specifically not entering from 45th Road, which is a residential street. And after the hearing was closed and calendared for decision, the owner reversed position and did not agree to restrict access in that way. Following the board's decision to dismiss, the applicant filed an Article 78 petition and a motion to rehear the case under the BSA rules. And subsequently entered into a stipulation agreement with New York City's Corporation Council, agreeing to withdraw the petition and withdraw the rehearing application on condition that the board review its decision to dismiss this case, the case. The rehearing application was withdrawn and is not before us today, so anything that you might have seen in a folder was with respect to the rehearing application, and that's not before us today. The stipulation required that if the applicant, quote, wishes to submit additional documentation to the BSA, unquote, it had to have been submitted 20 days prior to the scheduled hearing date. I didn't find anything submitted in connection with the review of this decision. I don't know if the applicant understood that submitting on the rehearing is not the same as submitting on review. But I personally believe the board did err in dismissing the case for failure to prosecute, and we should have brought the case to a vote on the merits. So I would be in favor of reviewing the decision. Anybody else?
You said you'd be in favor of reviewing.
Reviewing the decision.
Yeah.
It's not
Yes.
opening it for a rehearing. We just look at our decision and we decide whether we want to how we want to modify it. And what we look at, take it back, sorry. We voted to dismiss for failure to prosecute. So instead, we should be voting on the merits and so discuss what the merits were, and then we vote however we vote.
Okay.
Okay?
I agree with that. I would hope that they would brief the issue for our review.
Could you speak
I
up?
would hope
Sorry.
that they would also brief the issue for our review.
Okay.
Or would the board think that's adding?
So that's adding, so this is literally a review of our record. So we have an existing record, and instead of dismissing it for failure to prosecute, instead made a motion to grant, and then everyone decides what they want to do based on that, the decision there would have been a decision, which might have also ended up in an Article 78, but you don't know, right? So I think that we have a complete record. The applicant was given 20 days in advance of this hearing to submit, and they didn't submit anything. So we can, I don't think we make a decision tomorrow, though, because this is just a decision to review the record. So we can put this on for another day, so everyone has a chance to review the record, and then, okay?
Move on.
Yeah.
Item number 7, 6891BZ, 223-15 Union Turnpike, Queens.
We have proof of service of initial application and notice of hearing to officials. Community Board recommends approval, but states that new lighting must be directed away from adjacent homes. The Borough President also recommends approval. Photos and the plan indicate a trailer is being stored on site. I'd like to know what that's for. It's quite a large trailer. Landscaping along the perimeter fencing is pretty sparse, but there wasn't much landscaping shown on their last set of approved drawings. There's a 12-foot high separating, there's 12 feet of fence and wall between the residential uses and on both sides. So there's like a 6-foot high wall and a 6-foot high fence. So the purpose of shrubbery is sort of undercut by the fact that you've got this huge divider, it seems.
And it's in very good condition.
Okay.
This is a site that is well maintained. The landscaping is also areas well maintained. I was there the other day and the trees were doing pretty well. Oh, sorry. The landscaping is in good condition. And the sparse, yes, but whatever is there, it's well maintained, and the site is in good condition. The paving, the wall, and the fence also.
Okay. Any other comments on that?
Okay. Appeals calendar, decision items. Should I call them all together or separately, Lauren?
Let's be all
Sure.
together.
Yeah.
All together?
We'll see what happens.
Okay. Decision items, item number 8, 16612A3, 638 East 11th Street, Manhattan. Item number 9, 166-12A2, 638 East 11th Street. And 10713A, item number 10, 638 East 11th Street, Manhattan.
Okay. So as we discussed at the last hearing, these are motions to re-argue, for which the board must agree with the movers or move-ins, I'm not sure which is the right one, that it misapprehended relevant facts or misapplied controlling principles of law. At the last hearing, I suggested that perhaps there was a case for a motion to rehear, believing that it was possible that the board had not had before it information about DOB's procedural operations, and that these somehow prevented it from partially revoking or modifying the C of O, and that this information might fall under the rehearing findings of material change in circumstances or substantial new evidence. in response to the comments made by DOB and the owner's counsel at the last hearing, I reviewed all of the submissions in the record going back to the initial filings and listened to several of the review sessions and hearings to better understand the contested issues. Public hearings began on this case in November of 2013 and continued until decision on October 2017, nearly 4 years later. During that time, the board held 5 hearings, adjourned 9 hearings, took it off calendar and put it on calendar, all at DOB or the owner's requests. There were voluminous submissions and site visits by the board and DOB. Both DOB and the owner had ample opportunity to make their arguments and to clear up any factual errors or explain shifting approaches. The C of O revocation case was left open for 4 years. The owner had plenty of time to correct errors in the plans and illegal conditions at the site under the DOB's and the board's direction. The DOB had plenty of time to enforce against the owner and require that illegal conditions be corrected. The facts were set forth in these submissions and observed in the field, so I don't see how the board could have, after all of this time, misapprehended the facts. BSA is not an enforcement agency. It seems as if DOB is asking it to act as one through their re-argument motion. With respect to controlling principles of law, Putnam Armonk v. Town of Southeast, the 1976 case upon which the BSA relied to determine that the vested rights as to the rear building had been abandoned by the owner, was submitted to the board by the owner itself on its very first submission in April 2013 and cited to in its papers. With respect to the question of a partial C of O revocation or a modification of the C of O to remove the rear building from it, the DOB stated in its December 14, 2016 letter to the board that temporary certificates of occupancy in effect prior to the September 2006 excluded the community facility medical offices. Those TCOs make no mention at all of the medical offices at the site and say nothing about the existence on the zoning lot of a structure in the front and a structure in the rear, although it is common in other situations for Cs of O to note the existence of a separate garage or other structure on the zoning lot, and sometimes even for a garage to have a separate C of O, even though it is accessory to the main building. Furthermore, the BSA has historically approved fire department applications calling for the modification of C of Os to allow changes to fire safety equipment. So it seems the board did have adequate factual information to render a decision, having observed multiple examples of what effectively were partial TCOs or modified COs. Furthermore, the owner argued as recently as September 25, 2017, that the vesting was relevant only as to the rear building, since the front building was not affected by the text change. The board agreed with that. Neither the owner nor DOB have provided the board with citations to the sections of the law it supposedly misapplied. Hence, I don't see a case for either re-argument or rehearing here. However, the board does have the authority on its own motion to review its decision pursuant to Rule 1-12.6. In reading the resolution, I see that there are clauses that could be modified to clarify the board's rationale and clauses that, if more carefully written, could provide better guidance to the owner and DOB about how to move forward. So I would make a recommendation and ultimately a motion to review the decision under Rule 1-12.6, which is not the same thing as opening up the whole hearing again for new discussions or anything. We're just going to modify how we phrase the resolution. So everyone should be, and we're not doing that tomorrow. We're just going to move to do that. And then at a subsequent hearing, everyone will have looked at the resolution and make recommendations about how it should be clarified. Okay?
Item number 11.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I just want to say
Oh,
that
I
the
apologize.
owner, at the last hearing date, the owner rejected the idea of a rehearing. They objected to a rehearing.
Correct.
So I'd like to put that on the record.
Yeah, that's true.
May I proceed? Mm-hmm. Item number 11, 2017-48A, 36 Hardy Street, Staten Island.
Okay, after several tries, revised the drawings, and I think they've got it right now. So I don't think we had anything outstanding.
Good. Continued hearing, item number 12, 2017-68A through 2017-96A, 7-7 to 49 Territz Loop, and 11 to 16 Frozenon Lane, Staten Island.
The names are hard, right? The community board revised their approval. We asked them to take a look at this in light of the 34-foot wide roadway and fire department's prohibition on on-street parking. This community board stated that either the driveways to the houses be widened to accommodate 2 side-by-side parking spaces, because now they're all tandem, or the roadway be widened to 38 feet. So the community board is opposed to this project, and I get why. The borough president's letter of May 7th, 2018 objects to DOB's exclusion of the houses that have yards facing Richmond Valley Road, since the actual access points for vehicles are the private roads. Unless this were an appeal of DOB's interpretation of the general city law, we don't review DOB's approach to whether those houses must receive waivers. So in any event, those houses must still be included in any kind of restricted declarations or homeowners association agreements, since in fact they do require access from those private roads. We received a copy of the city planning school seat approval letter that was updated. A site plan was revised to include a single cross-section through the roadway and a note. If the idea was to provide a builder's pavement plan for their private roadbed that complies with all DOT requirements, I don't see why that site plan doesn't look like a builder's pavement plan. The whole idea is that you're matching all of DOT's requirements for building construction. HOA, a homeowners association and attached restrictive declaration were provided that indicate obligations on the part of future homeowners to maintain the common property. Fire department prohibits parking on these private roadways, so a restrictive declaration should be provided that requires enforcement of those restrictions. We have models of that. The DEP May 5th, 18 letter has not been responded to, apparently. I could read the comments, but it's the April 5th, 2018 letter from DEP.
No, we made I sent their submission to DEP.
Yeah.
They submitted, no, but so DEP, they may have sent them, but we don't know
We don't have
what
a
the
response yet.
is.
Yeah, we don't have a response,
There's
yes.
still open issues is the point. However, despite all of that, I go back to my statements at the prior hearing. This is an application for a GCL waiver that would enable development of 35 houses, which is actually 70 homes, none of which have direct vehicular access to a mapped street. The applicant has not explained at all what type of hardship or practical difficulties it would suffer if it went through the proper process of a mapping action or a large-scale development action, which goes through city planning, which takes into account concerns about traffic, infrastructure, site drainage and flooding, environmental impacts, utilities, etc., and is subject to full seeker review. The scale of this review does not appear to be ministerial in nature in the same way that smaller GCL 36 applications arguably are, since this development could indeed have an environmental impact, especially in this case where a really high retaining wall is being built around the property, which rises to almost 20 feet in places. So it's basically putting this entire development in a bathtub. And I don't know who reviews the impact that the wall will have on neighboring properties. I don't know in what context that gets taken care of, and it can't get taken care of in our context, right? So, and further, when there is a mapping action, the city enters into a mapping agreement with the property owner, which obligates the owner to make certain improvements. We don't have any such obligation here, so their drawings could show that they're doing whatever, but they don't have any formal obligation to to work with the same standard as they're claiming they will, whereas with a mapping action, there is an agreement that is enforceable by the city. And so, you know, I'm still in the same place. This is too big for us. This is something that should be handled at another agency. So, others?
I'd like to say that nothing in GCL 36 suggests that this statute contemplated a development of this size. In fact, there's case law that stands for quite the opposite position. This is not an owner facing a hardship and trying to make the best use of his land. Rather, this is an owner creating a community within a community. If the legislature intended the BSA to take all of the considerations necessary to secure and regulate this type of application, it would have supplied the BSA the funding to support the staff required to do so. Further, at the CPC, the builder's payment plan, discharge issues, transportation issues, etc. are reviewed and resolved. After that, a mapping action includes a substantial mapping contract, which is more than a contract of sale, but a filed agreement with multiple covenants, which ensure the compliance of such a developer. This contract is then reviewed for a fee. The statute gives BSA the ability to grant, but not the requirement to. We're supposed to use our discretion and know when other statutes better apply. It is without question that, for me, this is not a small-scale development as the one contemplated in GCL 36, and rather this is a development that, for the sake of the owners, the neighborhoods, the community at large, requires the careful consideration of a mapping action.
I disagree. I think, having been here for quite a bit of time, this is not the largest GCL 36 application that we have had. We've had many that are at least as large. I don't see anything in the statute that limits the number of units that could be considered for a GCL 36. And so I think that to limit that here or to disapprove this application here would be actually arbitrary and capricious, because I don't think we have anything in our history that supports making a limitation on the number of units. So I think that this would end up going to the courts and then coming right back in our lap.
I would have to disagree. I believe that we are entitled to change our position. I also believe that there is substantial case law that gives us the discretion to have certain requirements. And I also believe that the statute, as the case law suggests, the statute was not intended for this type of development. And when there's another statute that better applies, that's the statute that's supposed to govern.
But this isn't an interpretive appeal.
Otherwise, it's a
So
loophole.
I'm not quite understanding. Yeah, I'm not quite understanding why we're vetting those issues when this isn't an interpretive appeal as to what the statute actually meant.
Because it's coming to us as a GCL 36. We at that point have the discretion to say whether or not this is what GCL 36 is intended for. And the case law suggests that it is not. And therefore, if there's a different statute that better applies, that's their avenue. This is not a taking by disagreeing. They have a different avenue to further their needs.
I think
Otherwise, allowing a statute that doesn't best apply is allowing a loophole that wasn't intended by that statute.
Okay, you definitely have a right to your opinion. I feel that if the findings, as the chair suggested, are that they need to provide information about their hardship in complying with regular development or using other avenues, then I suggest that if they want to persuade members of the board, they should do that. But I am not in agreement with the other views pointed out here.
Okay. The only thing I'd like to say in closing to it is we don't have the resources to review all of the different, we don't have on staff a transportation expert. We don't have on staff a discharge expert. These applications would be the applicant providing us with his own expert, which in my experience is not you get what you pay for. And we don't have it to review what they're providing us. We don't have those experts on staff. City planning certainly does. Are
you talking about a transportation analysis? No. Because we require transportation analysis in a whole slew of cases that have transportation impacts, and we have never before made a statement that we don't have the ability to review and rule on that. So I can't understand why in this case, where you're talking about 70 homes, 140 units, or 70
No, no, no,
units?
it's
Oh,
70.
29 two-family homes, 58
No, 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 to be
units.
more, it's 35 two-family homes and 70
Okay, 70 units,
residences.
140 cars that are going to be outside of the public transportation system on private roads. And you're saying we don't have the ability to look at a transportation analysis and deem whether or not we find it credible or whether we agree with its findings?
No, no, no,
I don't agree.
so it's a different kind of just to clarify. When we look at transportation, we're looking at parking, whether the parking can be satisfied on-site and so on. The transportation that's reviewed by, or it's not really transportation, it's road systems that city planning reviews, because they actually have the expertise, and they fit within transportation engineers. They're the people who know whether the roads are correctly configured, whether the turning radiuses are right, whether they're meeting the various requirements of the law, et cetera, et cetera.
I really find that you are starting to hold these applications to a new higher standard that I don't see that we have ever had to do before, and I really don't understand why the addition of 70, possibly 140 cars that are going to be off of the map street is an issue here that would make us pause.
But
just
that's
want
only
to-
one of those issues. That's only
Yeah, it's
one-
not just
It's
this.
it's not just that. If we limit it to the small, but there's environmental issues here that there's a discharge issue, there's 70 houses that water is going to drain off of. That's different than one large establishment. That's different than, there's a lot that needs to be reviewed that we don't have the resources to do.
So what would be the standard by which you say, nope, we're no GCL 36? At what point, what is the tipping point then, given your point of view, whereupon you don't think an applicant should come to the board for GCL 36? Is it 10 homes?
Let me
Is it 15 homes? Is it a certain amount of homes on a certain acreage? You're not articulating any standard. To me, that's arbitrary and capricious.
Let me answer this in engineering, from the engineering perspective. The way I look at it, it's not black versus white. The way I look at it, this development is not just large, it's large, and in addition to that, if you look at the topographic nature of the site, it's up and down. You have really high regions versus really low spots. So the first concern for me here would be the drainage. What we tried to do during the past month, and I did work with Tony on this, we tried to communicate with the DOB and with that DEB and have him look into the drainage of what we call it, that watershed. This development will create a new watershed that the drainage of which need to be carefully looked at, making sure not just the runoff and the discharge from the sewer system is going to be accommodated within the city sewer system, but in addition to this, you want to make sure that no flooding would occur at some spots. We prepared an email, it was sent to the DOB, and the response we got, I looked at the response last week, and it was nothing about this issue. It was just focused, the response was just focused on the ability of the sewer system, the city sewer system, to accommodate the drainage that's coming from the development sewer system. How about the surface runoff? About the flooding issues? Nothing. I would agree with both of you that if, I'm not sure, again, I'm new with the board, but I'm not sure if we looked at development that are as large as this. If the answer is yes, I believe we should look into this application and we shouldn't hand it to somebody else, like the CPC. The way, if the answer is yes and we should look at it, the way I consider this is, I would ask the applicant to get his expert to explain to us why he believes that the drainage issues are not going to be real issues after development. It's not going to be flooding. It's all these, because I looked at the calculations he submitted to the DOB, and I had some experience doing this sort of analysis. I couldn't see that he looked at, he just looked at that discharge coming from this development, and yes, it's gonna be okay to go to the sewer system. In the way from this discharge collection to the moment that this discharge will enter the city sewer system, it could be some flooding issues. I didn't see this looked at in the submission. If the applicant is willing to get his expert, demonstrate to us, explain it to us, testify in front of, before the board, that he looked at all these issues and he considered them, and he's okay, that he's sure that nothing's gonna happen, I would say we can continue looking into that. Without this, I believe we shouldn't be touching that application, and we should hand it to somebody who can.
But so we can't review, we have to just rely on what he says, because we can't review it, right? We don't have a DEP, I don't know whether DEP reviews this stuff. I actually don't know who reviews this stuff. And then the other point, and the reason why this one seems to shift outside of our domain, is because we really are supposed to be looking at whether the roadways do what they're supposed to do relative to safety, right? So that's what a GCL waiver is. We're not supposed to be looking at drainage, but the thing is, nobody seems to be looking at, the site seems to be sort of sneaking under the radar, and our GCL waiver facilitates totally the development of those 35 buildings, right? Or say 29 buildings, because 6 of them could be built as of right? So, so without the GCL waiver, you don't have this project if they go the GCL route. You can have this project if you go a mapping route or a large-scale development route, which is another, there are 2 routes at city planning to go to make this process, this development possible. But in both of those cases, they would undergo much more strenuous review. By going to us, it bypasses that strenuous review. That's the issue, and it totally bypasses it, because with respect to the watershed and all of that, we don't have access to whoever it is. City planning has access that reviews all of this, and city planning does have on staff, you know, they have, I forget how many hundreds of people they have at city planning, and we have 20.
And we tried to reach out
Right.
to the DOP again, I want to put this on the record, and we tried to reach out to the DOP and to make sure that they look into this.
But are you saying, Commissioner, that the site connection plan is a separate?
Different thing, totally
Separate
different
It's,
thing.
it's totally different.
Okay,
Yes.
you see the certified one. I just want to make
If you have rain
clear.
at a certain
I don't want
area,
the
we call
applicant
this
to raise
area watershed, when the rain falls, the slopes of the roads, the ground, all these kind of factors, the type of the ground, whether you have pavements versus like grass versus dirt, all these kind of factors play an important role in taking that discharge and how much out of the rainfall goes to the sewer system. And whether in the way from it falls on ground to the moment it goes into the sewer system, whether you're gonna have flood at certain points or not.
But wouldn't dry
But the-
wells be, why wouldn't dry wells on his site, wouldn't dry wells on his
But
site?
but it's more than just the dry wells.
It's just more than what his collection on his site is.
There's a 20-foot retaining wall separating this property
Right, and it
from the
collects all
neighbors
this
to the
water,
rear.
and where's it
Water
coming?
flows down the hill.
Yes.
And then goes this way, because the retaining wall is in the way, right? They don't have any provision on someone else's property to protect those properties from the redirected flow of the water. So there's a lot of issues, but, you know, let's say, there, at the very least, the issue, because just so we can wrap this up and move on to the next thing, the very least is the developer needs to show that there's a hardship and practical difficulties about pursuing this project in other legitimate ways, right? And to the point about case law, all of the case law that we've read that talks about the legitimacy of having a GCL waiver, talks about single-family homes, talks about a house at the end of a lane where, you know, it's a dirt road that's half a mile long, and to expect the owner to improve that half-mile-long road is unreasonable, hence the GCL waiver. That's actually all the case law going back from the inception of this law, so
I
anyway.
just want to bring up two things. One is, any kind of review that would be required by DOT would have to be triggered through the environmental review requirement.
Yeah.
And the threshold for this area, this project will not meet that threshold. So it would not even go to DOT, even if it went to city planning for mapping or for even large scale, because it's less than the required SECRA threshold for traffic transportation analysis purposes. The other part is that this is in the special South Richmond district. So as part of the special South Richmond district, there are a lot of requirements, and I haven't looked at all the requirements as to what they can do, how much of topography can they erode, how much of trees they can keep. There are very specific requirements; those would have to be met, and those regulations were put in place, absolutely being clear of the unique topography that area has, and that it has watershed areas, it has that there is plantings that have to be retained. So all of those were factored into the special district that regulated and ensured that there won't be flooding into the other property, or there won't be excess creation of other damage to the natural area, not just within the property, but in the surrounding area. Not knowing all of those things, it is very difficult to say whether that was looked into or not. But I just want to put that out there, that the purpose of the special South Richmond district was to ensure that the natural area and all those were preserved to its best.
Right, but we don't know, again, we don't know how that's reviewed. Like if they're looking at rock outcroppings and the request is to remove a rock outcropping, we don't know if that's done based on sort of an aesthetic, don't remove those rocks, leave those rocks, and don't remove those trees, leave those trees, therefore situate your house over here relative to that natural area. That's not the same thing as looking at a watershed question.
You can put like some sort of generalized requirements, like the ones that you just...
You should look through the special district because it is very specific. It gives you what percentage of topography can be removed, can be kept, and this is to ensure that there is not this steep gradation that would get created. There are a lot of very specific requirements in the special South Richmond district.
I understand, but I would say if it's just the topo, it could have been like so simple, but it's not just the topographic, it's the topographic, the trees, the imperviousness of the land. It's too many factors that you cannot just simplify the drainage requirements based on...
You know what, I just want to say, if the board is moving in the direction of placing limitations on the use of this GCL waiver, then it really needs to communicate that very clearly and transparently to the people in the land use community, because the land use community has a right to understand what the regulations are, and they have a right to predictability. And I fear that we are moving away from providing that information for them, and that, to me, is a step backwards and not a step forwards.
I would agree that I think that we should set some
Right, but
strict rules as to what if it has to be a number and taken on a case-by-case basis. I would agree that we should take that route, but I don't believe it's a step backwards. I believe that to look out and to make provisions and to ensure that the future owners of these properties have some security in their property that we can't provide right now. I think that's a step forward.
Okay. To create standard. Okay,
Move on.
fair.
Item number 13, 2017-276A, 96 Industrial Loop, Staten Island.
Okay, the sidewalk continuity was shown on the BSA drawing. I note that the builder's pavement plan for this entire loop is general. It's a very old standard pavement plan, so I don't think it can be amended for the site. However, the sidewalk continuity will be a condition of the grant, so at least we make it clear that it's not on the builder's pavement plan. DEP still has open issues as of April 26th. DEP's comment about maintenance of the internal water main and internal sewer drain by the members of the Arthur Kill Association needs to have been stated in the declaration of maintenance, and I didn't have time to look whether it is, so the applicant should verify that it does.
That's Veronica's case now.
Yeah, so Okay, so just check whether, unless you know already, you don't necessarily need to check, the applicant can check. They're the ones who have access, just to make sure that what DEP says is clearly indicated in the declaration of maintenance. Okay.
Move on?
Yeah.
Item number 14, 2017-320 BZY, 428, 432 East 58th Street, Manhattan.
Sorry, I have a lot of notes. Okay. We have a follow-up submission from Councilmember Kalos and Opposition Council, who remind us of the following points. That in the event that the board finds that on the date of the zoning change, which was November 30th, 2017, and the lapse of the building permit by operation of law, excavation had been completed and substantial progress made on foundations, and that the extent to which that showing is made does not include work conducted when otherwise not permitted, and that any work conducted after hours was done so pursuant to valid permits. And I think with respect to this finding, I think based on my review that there is adequate evidence for the board to conclude that excavation was complete and substantial progress made on foundations as of the zoning change. With respect to the after hours permits, Councilmember Kalos and Opposition Council argue that DOB did not follow the requirements of Section 24-223, paragraph C of the Administrative Code, so that all 16 of the after-hours permits issued were invalid. They also argue that the street closure permits were invalid for other procedural reasons. However, I don't believe that the board has jurisdiction in this case to review the validity of those permits, since they were issued by DOB and DOT and never timely challenged. In vesting cases, the board, like this one, the board relies entirely on those agencies' determination of permit validity. DOT has confirmed to us that the street closure permits were valid. DOB has confirmed to us that the permit upon which this application is based was validly issued and hasn't come forward about the validity of the after-hours permits, and that hasn't been contested, so in any formal way through the administrative process. The other aspect of the board's finding is, quote, that the renewal of the permit that the board may grant upon such a finding is limited to an extension of 6 months to permit completion of the foundations. With respect to this, since DOB permitted work to continue subsequent to the zoning text change, the board has to determine whether 6 months is or would have been adequate to complete the foundations. Since the foundations they were 93% complete. I think there was ample evidence in the record that 6 months is or would have been adequate to complete foundations. Opposition also questions the application to the site of, quote, the stalled sites program, which allowed site safety work to continue after the statutory permit lapse on November 30th, 2017. Although this project may not have actually been a, quote, stalled site under the 2009 law that sunsetted in 2013, it is certainly understandable that, as stated by the appellant, DOB would seek to ensure that the site be safely secured prior to its shutdown and removal of workers and equipment. The record shows DOB's approval of the work and acceptance of the site as a, quote, stalled site. They obviously learned from their stalled site experience that that was a good effort, and so maybe they should have recast it or resurrected the rule or whatever it is. But I mean, obviously the idea that workers walk off a site and leave everything dangling isn't safe, and they had a lot of experience in 2007 to 2009 with exactly that happening. So So I believe we discussed at the last hearing by when work must have been in place in order to qualify for consideration under Section 11-331, and agree with the appellant that where the time of the enactment is known, it is logical to conclude that a law does not change until that moment, because in general, not even just with zoning, in general, they can't fine you for something if at the moment of fining you, at 2 o'clock, the law's in place. They can't they can't fine you at 1 o'clock. The law didn't exist at 1 o'clock, so what law did I break? That just seems logical, constitutional, et cetera. So we know what time this law was passed. And those are my comments. Any others?
No additional.
Yeah, I have two further comments. The first one is that during the last hearing, we asked the applicant to submit a certification on the drawings that all the work was done per the applicable codes and regulations. What was submitted so far is that the work was done per applicable. It doesn't say all applicable. So I did talk to the staff, and I believe she communicated with them. I'm not sure, did you contact them?
Yes, I submitted it over the weekend, and I've emailed you guys and put it in the commissioner's folder, but it was like at 9:30 this morning.
Oh,
So I'm
okay.
not sure if you guys have had a chance.
So the wording was corrected to say,
Was it submitted?
Yes, it was submitted, and it's now submitted to say compliance with all applicable codes and regulations.
Okay, that's good. This is the first thing. The second thing actually was, and I would say that on this specific application, the board even went further on this specific case when it comes to looking at the zoning resolution requirements. In 11-331, if you look at it, it calls for two conditions or two requirements in order for the work to vest. The first one is that the permit is lawfully issued, which I believe the DOB confirmed that the permit was lawfully issued. The second thing it calls for is that the construction itself is lawful. Lawful construction, like I explained last hearing, we should be made sure that this construction is done not just per the codes, but also per the approved DUB plans. And this is the second point I'm coming to. I would like to hear from the construction manager, the structural and the geotechnical, a statement that says that all the work done was done per the DOB approved plans and no deviations from these plans were incorporated. And if there are like any deviations, I would like to hear from them that a post-approval amendment was obtained prior to implementing these deviations.
prior to, usually they do it
It is always
after.
post.
I'm sorry, yes,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, after these deviations were implemented, yes. Apart from that, during the last hearing, I noticed that the public, especially the public, were confused about something. Most of the people spoke last hearing were talking about the board action on this, like the board is given an exception to somebody to complete construction. My understanding is that it was a zoning change on this specific project. And in case of a zoning change, the governing law here is the zoning resolution, unless there is something that it changes the provisions of this zoning resolution. In case of the city council resolution that we received and that was submitted, it was a vesting modification clause in that resolution. That clause specifically spoke about changing the period that could be granted for the applicant to finish construction, to complete construction. And I believe that period, in the zoning resolution, it's 6 months. In that specific language that was written off by the council, it was 1 year. So they said that the period, or the maximum, the later that this applicant could finish construction or is allowed to complete construction, is the effective date plus 1 year. And later the council wrote of this.
Yeah, they removed that,
Yes.
that didn't pass.
Yes, I have seen people talking about this, like the council took off the rights, the vesting rights of the applicant. My understanding to this is different. The council didn't take away the rights from the applicant to vest. My understanding is that the council, when they wrote of this, they sent everybody back to the zoning resolution language or provisions.
No, so there,
I think
yeah. Sorry?
I think I understand what he's saying. I think what Commissioner Shida is saying is that the provision added that was subsequently removed gave a year to complete, and in omitting that, they weren't saying this building can't vest. They were just reverting to the default of 11331.
Thank you.
Providing 6 months in addition.
Yes.
Right.
Is that correct?
Right.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, I
Right.
hope this is clear to everybody because, like I said, last hearing, it was everybody is blaming the board. You're gonna give an exception to this. No, we're not giving an exception. We're applying the law.
Correct. The laws that has been applying since the beginning of the zoning resolution, I think, to these rezoning situations and a building kind of caught in the middle in process when there's a rezoning. Okay. Any other comments on this? No? Okay.
I just want to, sorry.
Yeah.
In the opposition council's letter, in the opposition council letter, there was mention that the demolition work was done in an illegal or in an unlawful manner. I'm not sure how relevant that is.
No, that's about, not demolition, that's about another case. They were using as an example, a case where a building had been mechanically demolished.
Okay.
And the board in that other case said that the mechanical demolition was not pursuant to permits. It was supposed to be manually
Right,
demolished.
I know which case.
Right, okay, so that's not related to this case because this was a vacant site.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Go on? Yeah. New cases, item number 15, 2017-58A, 7 East 69th Street, Manhattan.
Okay. This is an appeal by the fire department of a determination of, an appeal of a fire department determination, that the building is out of compliance with the requirement to have a sprinkler alarm system that is tied to a monitoring alarm company. I think that ultimately what determines whether the sprinkler alarm system was required is what the approved drawing showed and what was required under the then applicable codes. The C of O states that smoke detectors and sprinklers are required. The approved drawings are a bit difficult to read in PDF format. It might be easier to see the originals, but in PDF format, you can see that there are handwritten sprinkler notes that refer to sections in the 1968 building code. They state on one line that, quote, FD connection will be provided per section 1702.4 and, if I read it correctly, 1703.6 A and B. I'm assuming the word FD is fire department, just for the sake of having to assume something. And then, so, if you look at 1703.6A, it requires a sprinkler alarm system in accordance with reference standards 17-2 and 17-3. 17036B requires a sprinkler alarm when there are more than 36 heads in a fire area or section. That's a not defined term as far as I could tell. The plans certainly show more than 36 heads in the building. Whether that's 36 heads in a fire area or section, I don't actually know. However, and reference standards 17.2 and 17.3, I don't have a copy of the whole reference standards book, and you can't find that easily online, so I actually don't know what those say, but that's really for the appellant to bring forward. But so far as I can see, the drawings said it will comply with those sections that require a sprinkler alarm system. So the DOB folder that they submitted to us includes an approval letter from fire department for a, quote, central office connection to fire alarm dash pump. As fire department points out in their January 31, 2017 letter, the owner is conflating a fire alarm with a sprinkler alarm system. As noted above, at the time of filing for a permit to install the sprinklers, the building code required that this sprinkler system have a sprinkler alarm. There is an incomplete record on the building information system about the history of this building, which appears to have been constructed as a new building pursuant to 1983 NB permits. Neither BIS nor the record established for certain that the initial permits were for a single-family home, trying to understand why they would have wanted to put in a sprinkler system. If the owner wants to eliminate the sprinkler alarm system, it will have to work this out with fire department, as fire department directed them to over a year ago. I can certainly understand from a fire safety point of view why a sprinkler alarm system should be required, and also why non-functioning sprinkler systems should be removed. It seems to me the solution is actually either you shut down your sprinkler system and you remove the heads so that nobody thinks that there's a working sprinkler system in the building, which could give you, uncalled for comfort that you'll be okay in a fire. But I do understand the idea of an alarm system on the sprinklers to alert outsiders that the sprinklers have gone off for a lot of good reasons, right? So that's my take on it. Anybody else? No?
I wasn't satisfied with the briefing of this. I wish that the applicant would brief with the statutes that are relevant and not have us to dig for these sections that apply here. And I hope that moving forward we would get something like that.
Move on. Zoning calendar, decision items, item number 16, 3114BZ, 165 Spencer Street, Brooklyn.
Unbelievable, but we have air quality sign-off.
Yahoo!
So I don't know if there was anything left on this. The last time we actually heard this application was 3 years ago. Closed in almost happy anniversary, July 28, 2015.
The updated final EAS
Oh, okay, and the updated EASs have been submitted, so we're finalized with that, okay. Good.
Move on. Item number 17, 2016, 4276BZ, 333 Johnson Avenue, Brooklyn.
Madam Chair, I must recuse.
Okay, there's some open language issues in the RAP and DEP with respect to the vapor barrier, right? But a general note was added to the plans about the vapor barrier, it's just a super general note.
Right, we asked them to add the general note, but they added more than that and changed the conditions in the RAP a little bit. So we reached out to DEP and they weren't comfortable with the second note, if you noticed in the cover letter and on the plans. So we have a conference call to discuss this afternoon.
Okay. So maybe it will get cleared up, but then they would need to make their changes to the drawings really to both documents very quickly.
Right.
Okay. No, just a second.
Yeah, no. I'm waiting for Dara.
Yeah, no.
No.
Yeah, no. No, yeah.
Yeah, no. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Good. Continued hearing items, item number 18, 28013BZ, 3618 Main Street, Queens.
The drawings were revised to clarify, sort of, that there won't be a conflict between people dropping off the cars and the active car garage in the valet area. I say sort of because I'm not sure that they were so clear. I don't really understand the location of the reservoir spaces. Maybe I don't understand exactly what reservoir spaces are for. I thought they're supposed to be near the drop-off area so that when you're queuing to have the valet take your car, that there's a place for you to stand. Instead, they're sort of scattered throughout the building. in fact, nowhere near the place where you drop your car off. So I'm not and there's plenty of, it's not like there's not room. There's plenty of room in the kind of drive-bys. So why they showed the reservoir spaces where they did, I just don't really understand the reservoir space.
Part of it has to do with ease of maneuverability within the floor plan, so that when valets are moving cars to get to a car that may be a couple of cars in, they can put the cars that they're moving into a space that's out of the drive aisle, so that they could actually get to cars that are further back.
Yeah, and that's why they have distributed it on 3 different floors, with most of them on the first floor, recognizing that that's where the pull-up will be happening. People will be coming in to drop it off or
No, actually, more of them, there's only 3 on the first floor, on the floor where you arrive to leave your car with the valet. Most of them are on the floor where the driver, where the valet guy's in the cellar or wherever, whatever.
I think that can probably be corrected. There should be a little bit more on the first floor, just to make sure you don't have a backup.
Right, but they do also have the sort of circular drive for the hotel guests. So that kind of takes hotel guests parking out of the garage, because those people give up their cars outside in that little circular space.
Right.
That was a concern we had in the way how the pedestrians were going to navigate this space. They have divided it up into the hotel people will be dropped off by the hotel, so they will never have to enter the parking lot, and that takes care of that pedestrian conflict with all the vehicles coming and going to the ramp. And the rest of the people entering the building is for that medical building, and they've moved all the waiting area and pedestrian waiting area closer to the building, to the lobby of that building. And that does eliminate the pedestrian conflict that we had a lot of concerns about on the ground floor.
Okay.
And I was looking at the analysis in terms of what they are saying to be the peak, even taking the worst case scenario of the peak that all the operations would have. There is more parking that would be provided than the peak occupancy. So my concern was with the reservoir space and how the reservoir space is going to be used. It would be nice if they can provide a little bit more on the first floor, just to make sure there's pull-up area. That's really my only concern. Right. But other than that, I think in terms of the numbers and the peak analysis that's been done, and we have heard many projects where we keep hearing that there is now more dependency on, people using Uber or other modes of transportation to come there, because people don't want to look around for parking, or they don't have somebody to drop them off to pick up, especially for medical uses. So I think factoring all of those other arguments that we have heard in cases, and looking at the amount of parking spaces that's been provided for the various uses, I'm okay with the count.
With the reduction,
With the reduction.
Plus, they revised their study to use the more standard. The problem with the revision of the study is, I don't know why this keeps happening with this consultant, is they don't provide the backup. So all they do is provide the conclusion, and they don't show us how they got there. So I actually don't know what number they used. But I know that they said they went back to the old standard, but they don't show you how they get there. They just show you that the total is now still good, right? So they really need to give us the backup. They should do it right away. Right. So, but and also importantly, they removed the rooftop spa from, which is not allowed, and so that is going to be a condition that you can't have PCE or spa activity on the roof, unfortunately, even though it would be very nice, but they'll have to use it for the hotel. What else did I want to say? Okay, so in terms of the location of the reservoirs, could you go back and look at the drawings and make sure that you're okay, because there were, as far as I can remember, only 3 reservoir spaces at the level of the drop-offs. Okay. Okay.
And look into that.
Good. Item number 19, 214, 14A, and 215, 14BZ, 50-11, and 50-15, 103rd Street, and 103-10 and 103-16 Alstein Avenue, Queens.
Okay, so this is going to be adjourned, but they're going to withdraw the variance and amend the plans for GCL 35 only. So, so ultimately, they're going to give us a withdrawal letter, I guess, on this? Is that how it's going to work?
I believe it's already.
Yeah, I thought.
Yeah, oh, I'm
they
sorry,
already did.
yeah, sorry, it says, I'm sorry, we got the letter, I
Right,
have looking
it's in their
at the note.
statement.
That could be
Withdraw
withdrawn.
215-14 and adjourn 214-14A.
We
Yeah.
could vote on the,
Withdrawal, yeah, sorry, I
I'm
was
sorry,
looking on the
just one more. They're adjourning the A case, but maintain, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Adjourning the A
A
case.
and
Withdrawing the
withdrawing
BZ.
the
Withdrawing,
BZ.
okay.
215-14BZ
Got
is
it.
withdrawn. To withdraw.
So when we hear that the next time, it will be on the appeals calendar then?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Item number, may I go on? Item number 20, 7715BZ, 24436 85th Avenue, Queens.
They request an adjournment.
Right? Item number 21, 10415BZ, 4452 Broadway, Manhattan. This case is being withdrawn.
They're withdrawing, and I just want to say, the letter that that says they're going to withdraw says, we're withdrawing and we're building as of right. Really? Okay.
It's withdrawn. Let it go.
You know how much time we spent on that case?
No, I would give him credit for withdrawing, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, compared to other applicants, I still recall the last hearing, it was a long one for me, and I believe they did the right thing. I think the way we looked at it is they concluded that there is no way to get this through, and they prefer to take like the easy way and just withdraw and build as of right. This is in contrary to other cases that
We go to the bitter
we
end.
advised the applicant from like the second hearing or the third hearing that there is no way to get this through, and they insisted, and they continued for probably 4 or 5 hearings, and at the end, they went back to square one. So I would give him credit for that. So,
Fair enough.
well done.
Item number 22, 15715BZ, 3925 Bedford Avenue, Brooklyn. This is administratively adjourned. We did not receive a submission.
Right, but more than that,
Yeah, it's,
nothing was
three
submitted. This is the
adjournments.
4th adjournment with the last hearing in August of last year. No explanation has been given.
Wait a minute, which,
395.
Yeah,
Well, in
he's-
March, there was a family emergency, we were told that.
Okay. So that's the
Right, there
thing,
was a plan.
but when nothing's submitted and it's sort of crickets out there, we don't know what to conclude. So, because nothing was submitted and it's not we're not being told it's for illness or anything. I want a letter out. Our council should now send certified letter, return receipt requested to the owner and representative, advising them that the application will be dismissed if a full submission isn't made by the next hearing. Okay?
Item number 23, 2016-4127BZ, 1547 East 26th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. So at the previous 3 hearings, we stated that too much of the existing building's exterior walls and joists were being removed. The project has been revised somewhat and is closer, but I'm still not sure that you have 50% of the exterior walls being retained on the perimeter, which is what we discussed at the last hearing. There are no calculations showing the length of the existing walls versus what will be retained, and I don't see any indication of the floor joists to be retained or their calculations. The architect should provide a diagram showing existing cardinal walls, that's east, west, north, south, etc., in elevation, but not where these appear at the exterior of the building. They provided a diagram showing these cardinal walls. We still have a threshold problem, although the requested floor area has gone down to .84, and the building height is more in line with the neighbors at 30 feet. We have, and I thought this applicant knows about this, we have a demolition drawing template that should be used to show the existing building retention. That's a kind of an easy way to show the formula for how many how many existing walls there are, which walls are being retained, what their dimensions are, and how they total up to equal the necessary percentages. So that really needs to be done. Anybody else on this?
I just kind of want, and and there was another project where I stated this. I feel this project is, like the other one, is unique in the way it's sitting right in the middle of a site, and it is very much underbuilt. And if one were to look at the situation of this building, if it were to build as of right, it's very likely most of these existing exterior walls will get subsumed as interior walls, and it would be more than 50% that would will be lost and will be part of the interior. What I liked about the revised proposal is that the architect has really made an effort of trying to retain as much of the exterior wall within the interior wall in its entirety, where the extension is just happening off the exterior wall in the rear or onto the side. And I feel that that gives me a little bit more comfort that there will be a preservation of the 50%, albeit not all exterior, but it will be partially exterior, partially interior, just because of the fact that this building current building is 0.33 FAR, and if it were to extend to a 0.5 FAR, which it is permitted, many of these walls would have become interior walls. And I think we should factor that in our decision.
Well, but so I go, one rule has to apply equally to all. You can't have a rule that's like this to one and that to other, because then how do you distinguish from one to the other? At what point do you say, oh, it's a little bit centered or a lot centered, or it's something like that? And you're not required to, you're not required to come here for a special permit. You can build as of right. And by the way, the rule applies to an existing building. It doesn't say that the building had to have been built before 1961. So if you want to do it as a two-step process, you could do it as a two-step process. But the fact is that we look at whether you've got adequate existing building being retained, and we've established this rule to make it clear to everybody that it's exterior walls on the exterior, and if you break the rule for one, then you really have to break it for everyone. Otherwise, you can't, it becomes chaotic, which is what we were trying to avoid that was going on previously, where there's so many different ways of people trying to establish what existing building was, and we needed to find one way to establish it. And by the way, it's possible to do it, you just have to do it. So it's possible to solve this problem, but it just has to be decided that you will solve it. So, Sal, did you want to say?
The only thing I'd add is, while I do...
Speak up, please.
The only thing I'd like to add is, while I do agree on having guideline rules, the opportunity for an applicant to show that adhering to that guideline rule, I think they should have an opportunity to show that there is a great hardship in adhering to that rule in specific circumstances, and that could be reviewed on a case-by-case basis, but that would be only in an exception type of case.
And here we go.
Then we're going again with not articulating a clear, standardized policy to the public.
So that's what, on these applications, that's what we've been struggling with since I got here, is how to create a clear policy so that everyone knows how to fit within, how to make the argument and fit within the confines of the rules that are established. And if we start with variances, frankly, every single applicant will come with an argument about variances, and we'll be back to having 7 hearings on a house. So we're trying to avoid that.
I understand.
Okay.
Go on.
Okay.
Item number 24, 2016-4171BZ, 823 Kent Avenue, Brooklyn.
They requested adjournment. They're still trying to work out a solution with fire department. This is the front building, back building variance. It's really, it seems like there's got to be a fire department solution for this, I don't know what it is, but it seems like there should be. Yeah, it has to do with firefighting. It's not just sprinklers. How did they get the fire trucks there? That's the question. Yeah. Did you, oh, no.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Item number 25, 2016-4274BZ, 1411 39th Street, Brooklyn. And item number 26, 2016-4339BZ, 5018 14th Avenue, Brooklyn.
There was a revised programmatic analysis of the combined school campuses, which resulted in moving the kindergartners out of the 39th Street building and replacing them with 5th and 6th graders. I'm still having problems understanding how those children will have access to facilities in the main campus without walking a very heavily trafficked and dangerous 10 blocks. So the statement of fact says they will be bused to 14th Avenue campus, but it also says that only 30% of the 5th and 6th graders actually get bused to school. So that means they're walking to school, and that was the site visit where I saw forklifts and children in direct opposition. The statement of facts states that there will be bollards placed on the sidewalk to protect the students from the forklifts, and but that's city property. What's the plan there about the bollards? They mention off-site bus storage for these two sites, but site visits and every Google image I see has buses literally lined up all the way down all the streets. So where are those off-site bus storage, and when are they utilized? And because this is not an okay solution, let's say, it's not an okay approach to how you manage all of those very large vehicles. The revised programmatic needs analysis is very thorough and has persuaded me that there is a need for the multipurpose rooms to provide essential school needs independent of the lunchrooms. However, the schedule of use of the lunchrooms as proposed does show that there's a lot of downtime. So now it's showing like 2.5 hours to clean up, whereas before it only needed 45 minutes to clean up. And so the lunchrooms aren't available after lunch for multipurpose functions. So I'm not sure then that the fourth lunchroom isn't overdoing it because there's so much downtime. And of course, my concern is that the room's ultimate purpose is an expansion on the banquet hall business that it's operating in the Cats and the Beer buildings, which are next door. We said at the last hearing that we would not facilitate the expansion of the catering business in a residence district where the use is not permitted. The level raises the height of the building, that floor, because it has high ceiling, raises the height of the building, hence drives the height and floor area waivers, the necessity for which must meet the findings for educational deference under Cornell. The PA, the public assembly permits indicate permitted occupancy of 600 persons each in the cellar and first floors of Beer, which is 1362 50th Street, and 295 in the cellar and 290 persons on the first floor of Cats, which is 5000 14th Avenue, all of these occupancies are different than the rated occupancies shown on the drawings. So they need to either coordinate or explain. So if other members of the board agree that fourth lunchroom is perhaps not necessary, removing that lunchroom on the first floor could allow, since there's no need for 20-foot high ceilings, room even to accommodate the 5th and 6th graders in that building, so that they don't have to be relegated to 39th Street. And I just add that 39th Street is located in an M district where catering facilities, banquet halls are permitted as of right, so you can turn the whole thing into a banquet hall if you want, and not involve the BSA. The EAS has not been updated to reflect the revised submission. There were many comments at the last hearing that needed to be addressed relative to the EAS, and I don't believe we have any agency sign-offs other than LPC.
So we asked the environmental consultant to submit everything after the first hearing, once all the details are.
Okay. So I just needed to say that we still have a lot of open environmental, so that everyone is aware. Okay. Any other comments on this one?
No, I agree with you on the programmatic need, and yes, if there is a way to further justify the need for the fourth lunchroom, to reduce that and to consolidate more of the school operation on the school side.
Yeah.
I just have a question about the gross square footage analysis that they gave, saying that they have 69 gross square feet per student, where the median for new schools in New York ranges from 174 to 239 gross square feet. I just want to know, is that New York City or is it New York State?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, because we have very tight schools
Right.
here.
Yeah.
Anybody else on this one?
Item number 27, 2016-4301BZ, 136 Oxford Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. With respect to, that's again the threshold question, with respect to the retention of adequate amount of existing material, there's a note on the drawing, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong date. Sorry.
4301.
Sorry, yeah, no, I'm just reading. I have a code and I messed myself up. Okay. With respect to retention of existing material on the exterior, that was clarified in this unusual situation where there is no house lift, so the existing first floor becomes a cellar. So there isn't anything to retain because it's actually all, I mean, the only place you can retain it is in the thing that's called a cellar, which starts off not being floor, which is not floor area, but was floor area. That's what's made very unusual about this house. You're supposed to, the rule about an existing building is you have to retain existing floor area. So before this house starts into its conversion, that thing at grade is floor area. But then, when you redo the drawings, it becomes a cellar, so it becomes unfloor area. So that's very bizarre there, but there he's keeping essentially all the walls of the originally known as first floor.
That
Right?
clarifies it for me.
And so, right, so that's part of the problem of how
Yes.
we got our heads around this, right? It was like, once you convert it to a cellar, it's not floor area anymore, but it was floor area yesterday. So how does it go from being floor area to not being floor area? So that's the problem. That's how we have to look at these non-lifts, right? The lifts, it's very obvious. You're lifting the floor area up. So, okay, I just want to finish this one little thing. The CCD1 on code, this is the one that we have. It's not a ZRD1, it's a CCD1 that we have approved. Was approved on condition, and the plans we have should comply with them. So the cellar plan has to be amended and the conditions included on the drawing. The cellar plan, DOB said has too many partitions and like a corridor to the stair, and that's not okay. So the cellar drawing needs to be amended to comply with the CCD one. They're still waiting for the ZRD one. My mistake. I thought we had that. Okay, I'm sorry. So
No, I just want to commend the chair and the council for coming up with a solution for this kind of situation.
Okay.
yeah.
Item number 28, 2016-4347BZ, 1605 Oriental Boulevard, Brooklyn.
They requested an adjournment.
Excuse me. New cases, item number 1, 2017-15BZ, 2628 Edgecombe Avenue, Manhattan.
They have proof of service of initial application to officials and proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board 10's Land Use Committee recommended approval on condition. I don't understand why there isn't a full board letter, so somebody should reach out about that. Because they actually only have, Land Use Committee voted 9 in favor, 0 opposed, 1 abstention, and 1 recusal. And let's see. Sorry, I'm just reading the condition. On condition that they maintain the safety of the site and will explore the possibility of a night watchman and that they will explore ways to better maintain the space and will provide updates to the Neighborhood Block Association and the Community Board. We have one letter in support with a comment, quote, "They must have a traffic plan." I just wanted to note, relative to another application, this is an open exterior staircase where it's egressing 164 persons and then another 100 from above. So relative to an application we looked at recently, open stairs and community facility. So this is a very simple project with very modest waivers to accommodate what started off as an as-of-right project with what turned out to be small non-compliances in lot coverage due to the height of the extension in the side yard and a side yard width. There's also an exterior fire stair that is essential to egress, and by using it reduces the bulk of the addition. It isn't clear to me at all where the second egress would have been without that. Otherwise, there'd be two giant staircases and a pretty small floor plate. Maybe the drawings have a mistake in them, though. It seems to show a really, really long landing, like a 15 or 20-foot long landing. It may be that just the steps aren't showed on the drawing, but if that is a long landing on that stair, it's forcing the stair to wrap around the front of the building, and I'm wondering whether why that landing's there and why it couldn't just be a normal short landing and then continue more stairs, and whether that would eliminate the need to wrap all the way around the front. And then also just in terms of the consistency between those drawings, there's an axonometric that shows some kind of structure at the basement level underneath the stair that doesn't appear on the plans, and I'm not sure whether that's accurate or not. It almost looks like sort of this block that's holding the staircase up. So those were my only comments. Anybody else?
Yeah, I did not have much issues with this one. Only thing is I was trying to understand is that it would be helpful if the narrative is a little bit more clear in terms of the findings of the programmatic element of it. To me, that could be beefed up.
In terms of the
why they need that second floor to be a continuous second floor. So basically, the enlargement that's happening on that portion of 26 Edgecombe, which is the corner lot, is that they want to have a very uniform set of a full height of second floor, because that encroachment is not a permitted encroachment because it's above the height of you can have 23 feet or 1 story, whichever.
Right.
And in this case, it is. In this case, this is an encroachment at that corner lot.
I think that the section because they're only building those 2 levels, which includes a mezzanine that overlooks the sanctuary.
It's
I
that
think
section.
yeah,
right.
so that's the
one.
double height space of the sanctuary.
Right.
And you don't, if you've got the baptism at the end, which is like the location typically of any asp, right, of a church, right, then you need to maintain the ceiling height all the way across or nobody sees the baptism, right? And so they were clear that, well, not only that, it's the way you see it on all houses of worship, that the mezzanine level has the same ceiling height, goes all the way to the back so that you can see down to what's going on that,
Right.
either the stage or
No, I think in the statement of facts, that was there. It just did not get carried into the statement of findings.
Oh, okay.
That's all I'm saying. I'm not questioning that. It's there in the statement of facts, but that argument needs to be just included in the findings. I don't, and then that's more of a paperwork kind of thing for consistency. That's all.
Okay, so in the interest of speed, because I don't know that we have any other open issues on this, right? Yeah, right. No, what I wanted to say in response to this, in the interest of speed, then that little bit of change either can be made right now in the materials or stated clearly at the hearing and becomes part of the record.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else?
Item number 2, 27 2017-201BZ, 323 Elmwood Avenue, Brooklyn.
We have proof of service of initial application to officials and proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. I didn't find a Community Board 12 recommendation in the file. We have 1 letter in favor and 3 letters of objection complaining about lack of parking and the impact that prior BSA actions, namely the schools that are associated with this dormitory, have had on the same block. Also concern about rooftop playground and speaker noise at the rooftop playground and bike parking kind of chaotically on the sidewalk. On my site visit, which must have been before school hours, I didn't find any bikes at all, nor did I find bike racks. But I did peer into the ground floor building of the school, ground floor of the school building, and saw that there are bunk beds on the first floor of that building, and there are only supposed to be dormitories on the second floor according to our approvals. So I'd like to know what the actual uses are of the building, since the CFO does show dorm rooms on the second floor. The school that's adjacent came in with, initially came to this board with a 41-foot high building, requesting 2.43 FAR, no front yard, and non-complying side yards, and the board pushed back on that application, reducing the building floor area to 2.32 FAR and a small front yard waiver. So it brought the height of the building down to 35 feet to be complying.
Rear yard waiver.
And a front yard waiver. It apparently didn't need a rear, well, maybe there was a front, I only found a front yard waiver. So on the school. Maybe there was a rear yard. No, maybe not, because it's a 20-foot rear yard. So maybe that was good for them.
That sub-district.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that was based on 230 students. So, but the board pushed back on the height because I'm assuming the board was concerned about the height, right, in the neighborhood. So I'm wondering why this building should be bigger than the school it serves. For example, they have floor-to-floor heights of 11'2", right? And these are dorm rooms. It's different. You have high ceilings when you have large spaces. These are little bitty rooms, clogged with beds, right? So there isn't any proportional need for ceiling height. So you could bring the height of the floor-to-floor to 9'6", which would totally work for a dormitory, which is basically like an apartment building where 9'6" is the normal height, and reduce the overall height significantly, and probably that brings it to 35 feet, so therefore complying.
I had a question I questioned what you are just questioning.
Okay.
But I also had a related question to that, because somewhere in their papers, and I don't remember exactly where, they say that their 11'2" floor-to-floor heights result in an 8-foot floor-to-ceiling height. And I was wondering, why do you need 3 feet of space for your piping and mechanicals on each floor? So I also had that question, because it seems like you could bring it down by like at least 5 feet, maybe even 8 feet.
Right. This is going to be just a sleeping area, no kitchen, nothing. So it's not like you need that much of mechanical.
Maybe you need air conditioning, that's it.
Yeah.
Like ducts for air conditioning, right?
But by the way, didn't we just do an apartment building, a high-end apartment building where they brought their floor-to-floor heights down to 9'6", right? High-end, sell for millions, that kind of thing. So let's just say those people are more demanding in their HVAC systems than the kids at school here. So I note also that the 2007 resolution for the adjacent school building discussed at length the non-compliance of the school's other building at 129 Elmwood Street. So that's application 139-96BZ. And I wonder whether the adjacent school, this one that's right next door, has complied with the conditions of its grant, which says, among other things, no commercial catering, the only outdoor recreation space shall be located on the roof, and shall only be used from 8:30 to 6:30 p.m. And so neighbors are complaining about noise on the roof, so something's not being properly managed there. That garbage shall be stored in the designated storage area, and certain about pickup, and then specifically that 4 bike racks shall be located as indicated on the BSA approved plans. I note that there aren't shown on the approved plans, unfortunately. So, but there do need to be bike racks, right? There were several complaints about parking in the area, and obvious concern that without parking, this project will exacerbate the situation. So first I asked, do the students have cars? Has a survey been done to verify the statement and the statement of facts that they don't drive? Why can't, and then, there's a cellar that's basically not being used for much and not being excavated completely. So I asked, why can't the cellar accommodate some parking spaces? Again, I don't know anything about the parking habits, but there's a waiver of 20 spaces, I think. There were complaints also about bikes parked on the sidewalk haphazardly, which should also be addressed since the 36-space bike racks that were supposed to have been provided next door haven't been. And I do see that bike storage is shown in the cellar of the proposed building, but we should discuss whether racks are needed in this front yard as well, since I know what it's like to ride a bike and then you have to bring it down to the bike storage room, and so it ends up getting locked onto a bus post, right? So it's actually better dealing with the problem if you have racks in the front that everyone uses every day. And I didn't see environmental sign off except for LPC. Okay.
I was at the site last week and I did see one bike rack. I didn't see that many, and it was very well utilized. But I also saw, I think there's a building next to the site, subject site, that is also being used for housing. They have bikes all on the sidewalk and on their pavement. So yes, there is a bike rack, bike issue there, more so than parking, I would say. The parking is because there's construction going on, and a lot of the on-street parking has been taken over by that. The bike parking, there is a space between the existing school and the proposed building, which by the way is already under construction. It has gone up to, I think, the second floor right now. I don't know if it is setback. I don't remember if what the rear condition is, the build condition. It would be good if the applicant can provide photos of the condition of the site. But what I'm trying to say is that there is about a 12-foot space on the side yard of the school and the proposed dorm. You can provide bike racks there because that's not the fire exit. The fire door is not existing from that. A lot of bike parking can be provided that, and then you don't have to take your bike all the way down to the cellar. And I think the rear yard also can be used for parking because these kids seemingly will be just studying all the time. So if there is need for parking, that could be another location for bike parking.
For bike parking.
For bike parking. Right. Bike parking. Well, I had a question. Again, I agree with you with regards to the height, the floor-to-floor height. It can be reduced. The as-of-right proposal shows that the rear building, the rear portion, because there's a 30-foot requirement from the legal lot line, the rear portion of the building cannot be used as a dorm room, and therefore they are all study rooms. Was an alternative considered that looked at seeking a waiver for that, because you're seeking a 11-foot rear yard, and therefore a light and air easement of 30 foot is also being asked under the proposed condition, right? You need a 30-foot legal, you need a 30-foot clearance from a
legally required window.
Legally required window. That's one of the waivers that is being asked.
Right.
Why in the as-of-right could that have not been asked by providing dorm rooms instead of the study rooms?
Well, how could they have been dorm rooms if they have only a 20-foot rear yard?
Well, you request the waiver for that.
But then it's not an as-of-right.
No, I'm saying that. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying, use the as-of-right building
to
footprint.
make like a lesser variance argument.
I'm kind of getting to that. It's taking me a little while. The medicine is talking.
Oh, you're saying a lesser variance. Oh.
Thank you, Commissioner. Lesser variance where you consider the study area as a resident dorm rooms with a 20-foot rear yard, and that could be a lesser variance. Has that been looked at, and how many units would you get?
Okay, so the lesser variance being provide the 20-foot, but they want the 15-foot, the extra 5 to allow for the double-loaded corridor. That's what that's about, right?
The as of right also has a double-loaded corridor, right?
Double-loaded, oh, on the upper floors? No, there's always study rooms on that. The study rooms are much smaller than the dorm rooms.
So what if the building were to,
Because the dorm rooms, I forget how many people, 6 people in each
six
room,
or
something like
yeah,
that?
6, I think 6 is what's been proposed.
So you would only get maybe 3 or 4 beds in those study room sizes in the as of right.
Yeah, I didn't do the count, but just,
So you're saying how many beds would you get?
Right.
If you kept the 20-foot rear yard?
yeah,
For the Lester variance that gets waivers for almost everything but not height.
right.
But kept the 20-foot rear yard and then just put beds into the rooms that
The
are now
study, yeah.
essentially study room
Yeah.
sizes, or you slightly reduce the front rooms, move your corridor back, so maybe it's a little better layout, something like that.
Yeah,
Right. Well, that's the entry portion.
that's the second floor.
The other thing, they have an entry floor where they have a second floor where the staircase is allowed to have this double height, so you therefore lose the possibility of getting rooms. So to the extent that you pulled back to the 20-foot yard, you could take advantage of some of that loss, right, by
Yeah.
not having that double height entry.
Same thing is proposed by the proposal also.
Yeah, yeah.
And one question from a programmatic point of view wanted to know is so it's my understanding that most of the students that will be residing in these dormitories are post-high school students.
Correct.
And what is the length of the post-high school? Is it a 1 year or
No,
a
it's
2 year?
I think it's 4 years.
They
They
said you
said.
get like a bachelor's degree of.
Talmudic
Yeah,
studies,
Talmudic
yes.
Okay.
studies. So I just wanted a little more information on what happened between the 2007 grant and now, because the 2007 grant, the school was created to educate 225 students, of which they needed 30 beds. But now they haven't exceeded that enrollment number of 230 students, yet now they need beds for almost all of them. So did they change their program that requires, more people to stay on campus, or is it just that now the upper grades are starting to swell, which it seems like that's what they were saying, but I just want just a little more information about why the big change in the assumption, basically.
Yeah,
Or
so-
why was the initial assumption so wrong?
Right, right, okay. So of the 225, maybe more of them are those postgraduates than they had before.
Right, maybe that's what it is, that
Right.
it's just simply more of an emphasis on the older grades here. I don't know, just curious.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? No? Okay.
Item number 3, 2017-267BZ, 12918 Newport Avenue, Queens.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board and Borough President Katz recommend approvals. Councilmember Eric Ulrich supports. And we have 17 letters in support, and something's really strange. I don't have my notes. Okay, so what happened to my notes? This is very weird. It got written on something else. All right, so I'm just going to have to do this by recollection. So this application is really requesting, is based on obsolescence. They're arguing obsolescence, right? Where a building that was purpose-built for a boarding house with a restaurant in the boarding house eventually, or a long time ago, gets converted to being a restaurant with apartments above. And then the building is completely destroyed in the hurricane, and rebuilding it exactly the same would be obsolete in terms of how current business practice works. And they're saying that unless they have more seats, then they won't be able to Yeah, unless they have more seats, they won't be able to make this a going concern. So I do get the idea of the obsolescence argument. We have had some, I remember one, I think was for a catering facility where they said that's catering facilities, not catering, banquet hall of the grand old days doesn't meet the current market concept of a banquet hall. And so they needed a little more space so that they could make the rooms larger, whatever. And it was an existing business, and not doing it would just basically put them out of business. So I kind of get that. I don't know whether the financials support that. So, yeah.
I'm not convinced by their A case at all, although I am sympathetic to the business owner. So I want to separate out business owner from property here, because those are two different things. And yes, I feel for a business owner whose business was destroyed due to a flood. However, I'm not sure how that translates to a uniqueness case in terms of the property itself. And so, you know, the things that they cite, the obsolescence of the pre-existing building, I feel that once the building's demolished and you've got a new building, you have cured your obsolescence issues that have to do with the real estate. Maybe not the business, but that's a whole nother issue. Yes, a restaurant is growing and is very popular and can't be housed in this size building, but that doesn't mean that the building is obsolete. It just means that the business has outgrown the building and the property at this site. And so I don't want those issues to be confused when we talk about an A case. And incidentally, the comparables in the financials, just to say ahead of time, are actually comparables of smaller restaurants with less seats. So they're not even making that argument when they get to the financials that this is not serving the property owner properly because it is so much smaller, because the comparables have like 60 seats. So that's my issue. So I'm not really convinced yet. I think that, just for the record, they really need to remove all of the information about the tanks, the tank removal, and making the site whole, because I think that an unauthorized cleanup is illegal, and it's very dangerous, hazardous for the people on site and the people surrounding. And so I don't want anything in a formal record before a city agency that basically says, we had a 500-gallon tank, the tank burst, it leaked out into the ground, and people came with their bare hands, maybe, with excavators, with shovels, and cleaned this up, threw it on the truck, and we only hope that somewhere down the line where this dirt ended up, it was looked at and carefully sorted. That shouldn't be on anybody's record, and it shouldn't be grounds for any variance granting either. Not to mention the fact that they were made whole, maybe illegally made whole, but they certainly can't claim that they have a tank and the tank burst and this posed a hardship because the neighborhood cleaned it up and didn't charge them. It was done, so the property owner was made whole here. So it shouldn't even be talked about at all.
Right. Correct. Correct.
Yeah, and that was one of my concerns as I was reviewing it, is that was cited as part of the uniqueness, even though in the financials, it was stated that that has not been accounted into the analysis. And I agree, that to me was a little bit of a weak link. As I was reviewing it, I found it very I really am sympathetic to the owner in terms of what they've undergone and what they're trying to do, and but trying to match it with the uniqueness is also the concern I had. And the applicant is saying that they have moved some of the spaces, relocated the plan, actually the proposed build plan, ZV 102 shows areas that were relocated from cellar to first floor. When I'm comparing the proposed plan with the as-of-right plan, I do not see the difference. So it would be helpful if, through narrative, it can be clarified where that it may not be a physical relocation of the space, it may be more.
I spoke to the project manager because I had that exact issue.
Okay.
Was where's this reclaimed space coming from?
Okay.
It's an error in the labeling.
Oh.
It's not coming
Oh.
from anywhere. It was
Okay.
just the added spaces considering relocated space, but it really isn't relocated space. Because I went on Thursday and said, excuse me, but where's this coming from? Because I couldn't follow along either with the plans.
Okay, so that clears that out. So it's just an addition to
Yes.
the proposed building. What I found odd was the DOB had granted approval for this enlargement because it's been built. It's completely built. The site is fully built.
But it's
No.
not completed.
No, it's
And
not
that was
completed.
my other question, actually, is why are we even considering the one-story and cellar enlargement on Beach 130th? Because that's not completed as per the photos. And the
I went to
building
the
is
site,
not
it's-
complete. They're working on the interior of the building, so it's not,
The
it's,
exterior is all there.
what's the
It's just,
exterior?
it's just framed out.
Yeah, it's
Those
framed out and it
additions
was-
are framed out.
And it was covered so that it could protect against weather. But the inside is not complete, and they are currently working to create the inside. And so therefore, I'm not even
Of the
sure.
main building.
Right, of the main building, but you could see that,
see it in
that
the
one
photo.
story.
No, I was in the site last week and I saw the full built out.
It is, but I was there too, and they're actually still chucking in materials and completing what's
For me,
going
the
on
fact that the
inside.
shell is fully there, which is the proposed building footprint, is what I'm questioning. Is that it is
Well-
built to the proposed
Yes,
footprint.
yes, the envelope is there. You
So
are
they,
correct.
there was a statement in the materials where the owner is essentially apologizing to us for having gone ahead and constructed prior to approval, understanding that they have a risk because, and the reason that the argument given was about essentially losing the vested right to rebuild the existing building. That's not the same thing as there isn't a vested right on those two, essentially three little additions, right? So, so the apology for having built out the destroyed building wasn't necessary. They had the right to build the destroyed building, right? But building the addition wasn't required to beat any clock or anything, right? And, you know, the only thing you might say is it's a little cheaper because then you don't have to build a facade twice, right? Or you could have just put plywood on the outside for that area to see, find out what happens.
It looks beautiful. It's very nice. I think,
Unfortunately, variances aren't made on it.
I
It looks
know.
beautiful, therefore it's got
I
a
know.
uniqueness
And,
finding.
the other thing is that the narrative was a little difficult to follow with regards to as of right building. That the plan was a lot clearer, whereas the narrative didn't follow the plan as clearly. The as of right building that is shown in the plan, as I understand it, is the building that was the prior pre-existing footprint, and which has the non-complying front yard on Newport, and the enlargement is mostly of that as of right building. So to me, the narrative was a little confusing. The other part that was...
Sorry, I didn't understand what you just said. The as-of-right is the permitted reconstruction of the building that was destroyed.
Right, which is not there in the narrative
With
very clearly.
internal improvements to increase the number of seats
Right.
to 78.
Right.
So
Yes, okay.
my comment on that was, I have a question, which is, what was the pre-existing, and I don't know if it's even relevant with regards to financing, is prior to Sandy, how many seats did this space have? And in the as-of-right version, how many seats could have been accommodated?
They do say that somewhere.
Yeah,
And
it
now I
says
just
how
gotta
many
find
there-
it. The as-of-right that you see is 78 dining seats and 18 bar
18,
seats is
right.
the max you could have now
Right.
if you
And previously-
reconfigure the inside to make
Correct.
it maximal
And previously,
usefulness.
they had 10 seats at the bar and 42 seats at tables.
Right.
I couldn't find it.
So that, and then they reconfigured it to max it out, and they got 18 and 78.
So then the question is, the previous one, if they had 10 seats,
10 plus 42.
10 plus 42, and the as-of-right would have 18 plus 78. That is an increase from the pre-existing. Should that be analyzed also, the incremental increase from that and then the proposed?
But that's it's as of right.
That's the as of right.
Reconfiguring.
Right, to say that the as of right does not work because the pre-existing was much lesser than that.
Right.
Is there a,
Does it matter?
Say it again.
just from a financial analysis point of view, what I'm trying to understand, should we be using the pre-existing as a threshold or we should be using the as of right as a threshold?
No,
because
would
you have
use
to
the
max
as of
out.
right. You're maxing out what you could do as of right. It doesn't really make a difference that you had less seats. It's, we want to know what's the maximum amount of
Okay.
income you could get as
Okay.
of right.
So the maximum would be 18 seats and 78 tables.
Yeah, they said.
78 seats, not tables.
Sorry, 78 seats, 78 at the table.
Yeah,
Right.
uh-huh.
I'm looking at my notes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's how you would work off.
That makes sense.
And not from the pre-existing, it's from the
Right.
max. Okay, all right. That was a question I had. Now, also in the narrative, it states that with regards to the uniqueness, that this site is, as I quote, there is really no non-conforming or non-complying structure remotely similar to the subject site within 400-foot radius. I have difficulty accepting that because right at the corner of 129th and Newport, there are non-complying uses. And non-conforming uses and non-complying buildings. So that needs to be corrected, and that is already reflected in the neighborhood character analysis that has been provided by the urban cartography. So
So in other words, it's inconsistent in
it's
the statement of
inconsistent
fact.
within itself.
Okay.
Right.
I agree with you that there seem to be quite a few cases in the area that are both non-conforming and then also quite a few that are non-complying.
Yeah. So there has to be a different way of approaching the uniqueness on this site. The question I had for Commissioner Otley Brown was the financial statement states that the as-of-right scenario will have a higher vacancy rate and longer lease-up time. I'm assuming that is meant for the restaurant and not for the restaurant and for the residents.
Apartments, yeah.
No,
Must be the opposite.
I think
Yeah.
it's definitely for the restaurant.
For the restaurant.
It's for the restaurant, that's what I
You're saying a
assumed.
smaller restaurant will have a harder time.
So my question, since this is an owner-occupied restaurant, do you consider the higher vacancy rate? I mean, the owner,
You have to. You can't consider this as a financial statement about the business at this location. An appraisal's got to be generalized to the market
okay.
at
Those were
this
my-
area. But, no, I do have questions about, if we're going to go into the financials. I don't have that many questions, actually, because my bigger issue is with the A case, because so far I don't see an A case.
Right.
But
Any
my,
finding?
I'm sorry?
Any finding?
Yeah,
A
she
case,
says.
I said A
she's
case.
A finding.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
A
she said
finding.
A
Yeah, I meant A finding.
And just to pick up on, it's true that, I have to say that in reading this, I was so, let's say, sympathetic to the plight of the owner that I actually sort of lost track of the fact that we're consistent in saying you don't have an obsolete building if you demolish it. And, that's the thing that makes this bizarre is because under the Sandy emergency rebuild regulations, everybody was just told, go rebuild real fast, right? So, and the only thing you're allowed to rebuild
Is what you had.
is what you had, unless you want to build something else that complies with zoning, right? And so, in these locations, so many things were non-complying and non-conforming, so you just had to throw that thing up really fast. And so, you threw it up without thinking about whether you're obsolete or you're not obsolete, and I'm wondering whether anything about that could go into the idea of an obsolescence, which is completely different than what we normally see, where on a recent case they came to us and they said, oh, there's these 3 buildings, they're obsolete, and we're going to tear them down because they're so obsolete because of all these reasons. And that's their argument for uniqueness. Now we're actually looking at a vacant lot that's, say more or less a perfect rectangle, like that. So this lot is also a perfect rectangle. So you can't say that the site itself is unique, absent a building that was built on it. But now there's a building built on it, and that I'm trying to get at whether there's anything about the emergency situation that forced people to throw these buildings up, no matter what they were, in a certain way, and whether that's considered I don't know if it's self-created, you know, that's what I mean.
I mean, I
Very
think you would
unusual.
certainly, if you're going to rebuild and then rebuild something purposely obsolete, you would fall into a self-created hardship kind of thing. I mean, I have an issue here also with the fact that this property owner, it's unfortunate that they also own the restaurant, but this property owner was made whole. The community rebuilt this. There was no hardship here to the property owner in building this building. It was all paid for, everything all taken care of.
But we don't figure in those kinds of things either.
No,
on a
we
regular
don't, but I'm
variance.
just saying that it kind of, the fact of the matter is that it's just more of a statement of how the property is not suffering the hardship. To me, it's the restaurant owner who is suffering a hardship. So this building was built, if it were built as of right, with 78 seats, judging by the comparables they've given me here, it would lease up at $55 a square foot, because the other restaurant comparables that are given are all around 50 to 70 seats. I think there's only one that's larger. So they're making the statement here that $55 a square foot could not be gotten by the as-of-right smaller building. It could only be gotten by the proposed. However, all of the comparable restaurant leases are smaller. So the starting point really has to be that $55 a square foot could be gotten in the as-of-right, and more could be gotten in the proposed, not the opposite. So that's like one of the major issues that I have with the financials, which is to me proving that I don't really think that there's a hardship here either, in terms of meeting or not meeting the B finding. So also there's just a simple error with the parking. They're saying out of the 20 spaces, 2 of them are residential, and so they're going to assign rent to the 2, but they only assigned rent for 1. So I also would like them to just show me the math for the blended cap rate, because it's probably based on square footage of each use, but they really need to show me the calculations so I can follow through.
Anything else?
Right, the cap rate for as of right is higher, right? Isn't that?
It's 7.8 and 6.9, and what they're saying is the retail cap rates are high, but they're being brought down a little by the residential, and they're talking about a general blend, but you should show me the blend, which is what is your starting rate for residential, your starting rate for the retail, the square footage assigned to each, and how you're getting a blended average, or a weighted average. And then, I just had one other question. The 20 spaces that were originally provided, if the building was built from the ground up today, is 20 spaces enough to satisfy the parking requirement? Just curiosity, or is it just that they're carrying it through as a grandfather?
I think it's the latter.
Yeah.
They don't really say it, so I just want to know it.
I think what, to me, and that narrative was a little bit confusing on the parking, was that even though it's saying 2 parking spaces will be required for apartment and remainder will be used for restaurant patrons, and apartment renters and nearby residents would be able to secure monthly rental space.
Well, I can't, then in that case, assign rent to all the parking spots. You know,
So if that's the case, then the parking requirement for the restaurant, as it was pre-existing, I don't know if that's being met. So to me, that was also confusing.
Or maybe it's just so much lower. I don't know.
Well, most of the people there, they live around there, they probably walk there or something, so but.
Right, but
It's an enclosed community. Okay.
right, but if, I mean, this is just to debate this issue. If you're required to have 18 spaces for the retail and you're not using them and you want to rent them out, you shouldn't be putting that in the variance application, because technically you are not supposed to be saying, well, my restaurant requires 18 spots, but I'd rather rent it for $300 a month to these 18 residents who live a block away. That doesn't look good.
It's illegal.
Yeah, it's illegal.
So this is a residential.
Yeah, right.
That's
It's a residential district.
Yeah, but
Right.
it may be a residential district, but the parking is not for the residential neighborhood. The parking is for
Right,
the use
right.
on
No, right.
site.
Right.
Yeah, it's a commercial parking lot.
Right.
It's a grandfathered commercial parking lot.
Yeah.
So according to that, they should be subject to the commercial parking regulations, whatever they are. Okay. Anything else with that?
That's where I'm
Anybody else on this one?
Yeah, I did look at the statement of facts, and I believe the way they're approaching this, they are trying to prove that they have a hardship based on like multiple factors. The first factor is that like the obsolescence of the building, that they are saying that this building now, if we implement all the modernization, it could present us with 42 seats. And if they build it I'm sorry, if they build it as it was before, it could be 42 seats. If they implement all the modernizations, it could be 78 seats.
Right.
I'm not sure if this worked for them or actually against them, because I couldn't think of like some sort of change in the restaurant market or market standards because of Sandy. Sandy did change the firm maps, but it didn't change the market standards for restaurant business. So I cannot understand this.
So in other words, they were doing fine before, why do they need?
Exactly. This restaurant was there immediately before Sandy, and when Sandy hit, nothing had changed with respect to the restaurant business market standards. So if they build it, and in addition to that, they are saying that in 2014, they already applied for and obtained a permit and started construction for the same exact building that previously existed before Sandy. So I'm not sure what did it change since 2014 until they submitted the application for this variance. So this is number one. The second item that I believe they are presenting to us as a proof of the hardship or the uniqueness is the tank, the underground tank. They are saying that they have 500-gallon tank, and this tank is larger than normal. I'm not sure. I have seen single-family houses with 550 gallons. So I'm not sure how this 500-gallon tank, underground tank, is a uniqueness for that site. So this is the second thing. And they are claiming that it did rupture and it did like leak. They haven't submitted any study or sampling results that indicate that they did something to prove that they have an issue. I didn't see anything like that in their submission.
Right. And then that's why Commissioner Otley Brown is recommending that whole discussion regarding to the
Take it
tank and
out.
everything be removed from the narrative, because there can't be any documentations and no financial elements can also be factored in. So for various reasons, it should not even be.
Yeah, I believe so. I agree with that. Another reason that all this talk about the rupturing and the tank, it could be just imagination. I'm not sure if they did any testing. That's what they say. Can they prove it? I don't know. The third thing I want to talk about is the cost. When they submitted the cost for the as-of-right, actually usually we get the cost, let's say for the foundation, we get excavation support, concrete, we get it itemized like that. And we, based on the latest administrative notice that we issued to the public, we fight to make the applicant submit to us the details of the concrete quantity, the details of the excavation support quantity. For this application, they didn't even give us a breakdown for the foundation item. Like this is footings, this is concrete, this is excavation. No, they just gave us a lump sum number for foundation, everything mixed up in one number. And they are saying that they are using pile foundation. I'm not sure if they have support or any written document to justify the use of these piles. So that I would say the cost estimate they provided is still undone, and they need to work on it to prove to us that they have a financial hardship.
Commissioner Shabeta, do you have any comment? No?
I don't have any.
Okay. All right, good. Tony?
Item number 4, 2017-322BZ, 2259 Richmond Avenue, Staten Island.
We have proof of service of initial application to officials, but I didn't find notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Important, we need that. Community board recommends approval, but it may have been a committee report since there were only 11 voters. So we need to check about this one, whether the full board met. We have one very strong letter of opposition from a neighbor on Steinway Avenue, which is to the rear of the project, concerned about dangerous traffic and pedestrian conditions on Richmond, pollution from idling cars, noise from honking in the menu board, lighting, trash, loitering. The applicant should respond to these issues. My only concern was about there was no landscaping and site lighting plan. So site lighting plan with light spread diagrams should be provided, and landscaping plan. It just has the general concept of landscaping, but it's not telling us specifics, and we need that. Anybody else?
I just had one question, and that was if they could provide the estimated peak period of utilization of the restaurant and the drive-through. And the reason for asking that question is that all vehicles will have to enter through that, through one of the curb cuts, and then the queue for the reservoir will start. The remaining vehicles can park there and can exit out of that. So I just want to make sure that 24-foot wide drive-through area that has been provided between the two sets of parking area is enough for the utilization capacity of those who are trying to enter the queue for the drive-by and those who are planning to enter or exit, so that it doesn't create a backup of Richmond Avenue. In terms of the location, since it's kind of a block just full of all commercial uses with strip malls and various, I didn't think it would be much of create any issues with regards to the residential block that's separated by a street and another commercial use in between. So
Right. No, I was curious, in fact, about this letter concern about noise and so on, because I thought perhaps the person writing lived right across the street at the rear, but doesn't. And so I was trying to understand what the real concerns are. I can certainly understand fear about traffic on Richmond or pedestrians and more curb cuts, because that arguably that person is a pedestrian going to those businesses as opposed to many others who are driving. So I understand that issue, but it is a commercial strip, so.
There isn't much I visited this site, there isn't much foot traffic there. They're mostly driving by car to get from one location to the other. I believe on one side is the Barnes & Nobles with a very large parking lot. So I'd like them to respond to the letter and give us an idea of how they can address the issues. I wasn't so convinced by it.
Anybody else? No?
Okay, this concludes the public review session for June 18th, 2018.